Okay, hello. Madonna, croquet date, tomorrow, the 16th of January, yeah, 2024. This is the prediction, right? A quick little preference to this video is that I'm not going into huge detail here. There's way more to this. I usually say this in my videos and end up spending an hour doing a video, but this time I really want this just to be 10 minutes long. So there is so much more connections that I'm going to show you here. If something happens, I will obviously do a few follow-up videos, because there's probably a couple of hours worth of me waffling on about stuff here and different little connections. Okay, right, with that being said, the reason why I'm looking at this date, number one, there's a little personal reference with my grandfather. You will have heard this over several videos back with Madonna about my grandfather's little sort of weird connection to Madonna, and obviously 116 obviously ties back to my grandfather's death date, and so obviously, you know, there's a little tie in synchronicity maybe there with this date. But what I'm looking at really is this idea that this Madonna's death will sort of I don't know, what's the word I want to say? It's like a foreshadowing for the collapse of the dam with certain number jumps here. Okay, so you will have heard me talk about, obviously new people won't know what the hell I'm going on about here, but you will have heard me talk about these two number jumps in previous videos. Okay, and these two number jumps are important. Hopefully you can see this pretty clearly, but the 30th of September 1935 is when the Hoover Dam, okay, the Hoover Dam is dedicated. Okay, so it's essentially sort of, this is the date they sort of are saying it's finished, right? Through to 9/11 this past year is 32123 days. Okay, 32,123 days. What's important about this number is, if we go to Lucas numbers, which I've got down the bottom of this table here, what you'll see is that that set of numbers, or very similar anyway, is a reference for the number 10, and the number 10 is about an end of a cycle and a new cycle starting. That's the important thing here. And what I believe is going on with 9/11 was essentially us going into the matrix, okay, the loss of balance, and so then we have to have the rebirth and come out of the matrix. So this is a cycle where we're stuck inside the matrix. So this will be the end of the cycle with the breaking of the Hoover Dam and the flood waters and the, you know, the rebirth of man, okay, from the mother, okay, but the false mother. So all that trapped energy, all that, the natural trapped energy, that's what happens when we're in the matrix. We become a battery, remember? That stored energy there, that is a gravity battery right there at the Hoover Dam, okay? That energy is siphoned off and fed to a corrupt system, which is Vegas, for our metaphor, you know. And Vegas is, you know, Egypt, and that's where we may see the exodus of people leaving that area, walking through Death Valley, you know, all walk through the valley of the shadow of death, walking through Death Valley back towards the Golden Gate, you know, and back towards balance. Okay, so this is, you know, this is the whole thing that we're looking at, or I'm looking at, is this idea of the cycle starting over again, and this is the idea of death and rebirth. We're already in the death state now, and there's something that's got to be let go of, and it's that dead entity that is controlling us. We have to let go of that false ego, and that's when we can be reborn. Okay, and that's what's going to be symbolized, I think, if it happens, with the Hoover Dam collapsing. But there's this tie back with Madonna, because Madonna is one of these symbols that represents, you know, what was something, well, I don't know how pure she was to begin with, but the idea is she represents the Virgin Mary to begin with, and turns into the old crone, which I think, if you look at her career, that's what's happened. If you look at just the way she looked to begin with, compared with how she acts and looks and behaves now, you can see that change. So the metaphor is there in the world. And I said this, I don't know how long ago, about bloody her and the Queen. I said, pre Hoover Dam collapse, expect something to happen, to either of them. Sort of. I think I mentioned somebody maybe fall down some steps or something, have a fall, that kind of idea. Well, old Queenie died, didn't she? I wasn't really thinking that would happen, but but seeing as the thing's gone to that level now, it really got me started on the Madonna thing. I'm like, surely that has to happen as well. Surely we have to have that ritual death of Madonna as well, in order to, have this sort of this whole metaphor play out more correctly, I guess. And without getting too waffly at the start of this video, we kind of had that with the ICU thing in the summertime, where she got sick and was in intensive care, and the death and the rebirth kind of idea right there. Well, that to me, on the scale of the idea of the Hoover Dam collapsing and the whole system resetting, that to me isn't quite the level of of I don't know, metaphor that you'd be looking for. You'd actually be looking for Madonna to actually croak, so to speak. Anyway, so I'm looking at these numbers, this 321 123, and the amalgamation of this is really interesting. Okay, so 32,123 days. There's a number jump out there from the 30th of September 1935, which was the dedication of the Hoover Dam, when the Hoover Dam was kind of finished, through to 9/11 this last year, is that set of numbers, 32,123 days. So that in itself is pretty interesting, that number jump was right there. It's just absolutely mental, really. When I'm, the more I think about it, the more unreal it seems. But there is another date for the handover of the Hoover Dam to the federal government, which is important as well, because the idea of the federal government, in my mind, is again like the idea of going into the Matrix. That controlling power, okay, and that them taking control of the dam at that point. So this is another interesting sort of I've been seeing a lot of 31 references lately as well, but this is another interesting date, because this is the 1st of March 1936, okay. And if we do that number jump, the same 32,123 days, it takes us to the 11th of February this year. Now, on its own, you might say, well, that could just be random, that could just be, well, whatever, but the fact that Washington's old birthday, the guy that is on the dollar bill, the dollar bill that I've decoded, I don't know how many different decodes I've done on the dollar bill, and that, especially the one where Washington's head, you actually concertina fold the dollar bill, and Washington's head pops out, and the numbers that are in that whole sequence with Washington's head popping out of the dam comes to Labor Day, giving birth, labor. The whole idea there, and coincidentally, that is also a 122-day jump. Okay, so we need to bear that in mind when we're looking at the 11th as well, because of course 212, or if you were in English, you'd say the 12th of February. You'd write it just like this. That's our next day, and then 213 is our following day. Okay, and this of course 213 is actually a legit number jump, I think, on the dollar bill as well. We go from 9/11 to 213 with a 155-day jump. And again, go back and look at my back catalogue to see all these decodes. But what we've got going on is this reference to starting over again. Okay, we've got a nice tie into 9/11, and we've got a potential date here, 2/11. Now, what's interesting about 2/11 this year is this is Super Bowl. And Super Bowl, if you remember iPet Goat, with the Vesica Pisces shaped Super Bowl trophy, Virgin Mary thing going on in iPet Goat, you know, with the little the Jesus that's all bloodied and dead. Okay, again, you know, the idea that we're coming up to this date, and you know, maybe that Black Madonna has to die before that date. Maybe it's on. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe her death date is 2/11. You know, if nothing happens on the 16th, maybe it's maybe it's 2/11. I don't know, but it's just really, I mean, the numbers and everything's tying together so much right now. It's I won't say scary, but it is. I mean, without saying interesting a million times like I normally do in videos, it's just, you know, crazy. You know. Anyway, so this date that I've been looking at for Madonna, because it's all over the place right now, this 2/16 date, what we're looking at here is we're looking at a Fibonacci type sequence. Okay, so a lot of people know that I look at Lucas numbers, Fibonacci, and I've got several other I've got a whole chart of numbers that is really, really interesting. I call the chart of Lorraine. That's another video you can look up. But what we're looking at is we're looking at the idea of like that sequence moves towards it balances itself, right? And this is what we're concerned with, is this idea of balance, right? So any kind of Fibonacci type sequence is interesting, and you can start a Fibonacci sequence on any two numbers you like. You just take those numbers, start the sequence off on them, and that thing will come to about, you know, it will move towards the golden ratio. Okay. Now, what's interesting, as I started a little just recently, really, is I started just trying starting sequences on different with different numbers, and so I thought, well, I'll do one with the 3-2-1-1-2-3, you know, because of this going on here, and I also had a few other references to this 2/11. You know, the fact that it was Washington's birthday. And, you know, this is kind of tying back in with, you know, the birth of man, 9/11, or the birth of Christ. It's just, you know, I thought, well, we'll do some number doodling and we'll look at this. So I did this chart, and what I found was what we have down the middle of here is this light blue is actually the sort of, I've been doing a few of these now, and this blue middle set of numbers is the average between the two different sets here. Excuse me. So I've got one set of numbers starting with the number 3 and then adding 21 and then going from there, and then I've got another set which is starting with number 1 and adding 23 and going from there. And so my average right at the start of this thing is 2, 2, 2. Now we'll go to the chart of Lorraine, but I want people to bear in mind that 2, 2, 2. Okay. The other thing to note is that the second number in is again what we're looking at is the number 24 or 42, depending on which way you read these things. Okay. And there is a little case for, I know this is pretty complicated for new people, but reading a number this way from this line and reading a number this way from this line. If you like, this is a mirror line here. This is the pure balance point of the table here, this blue line. So you could, essentially, it's like 0. You could read the numbers coming this way. So 42 becomes very interesting. 222 is a reference to a balanced number as well. It ties back to 143, and 143 is a balanced number of the 55 and 88 added together. Okay, and 222 also shows up in my chart of Lorraine, which I'll show you here in a little bit. And obviously 911, 111, you know, we're getting some kind of, you know, like the second event now, 222. Anyway, so we've got this number showing up, and obviously the 11th of February is the 42nd day of the year. You know, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, all them good kind of references coming out of there, and there's damn references with that as well. So what's concerning me though is this idea of like this set of numbers right here. And I saw, well, you know, I mean, when you see this with Madonna, you know, this is her numbers here, except they're mixed up. You know, this should be like 816 for her birthday, okay? But anyway, they're mixed up. But what is interesting is that there's a really nice dartboard reference here, okay? With Odysseus, the idea of shooting an arrow, you know, you'll see the axe referenced in a lot of films, okay? But that axe could well be a reference to the idea of Odysseus shooting an arrow through the eye of the axe handle, or whatever it is in the story. And you see that like repeated with Robin Hood and things like that. You know, this idea of shooting an arrow in half with Robin Hood and things like that. Same story, different character type thing. But getting sidetracked. This is these are dartboard numbers, right? So let's just go to the dartboard before I get even more sidetracked. And we can see that the 11 and the 6 is across here. And then this 203 comes straight up and down. So there's a perfect cross in the dartboard. Okay. The 11th of June, which is just days before Trump's birthday, again is it 203 days left? Or I think it's 203 days left in the year. But, you know, this is super duper interesting that this perfect cross, you know, this 611 is tied to this perfect cross in the dartboard. Because when we look at numbers that surround, let's go to February, and let's look at the 11th. Okay, here's our 42nd day of the year. Obviously, these numbers are going to be a little bit different this year. Days left in the year, because you're going to have to tack on an extra day here, especially at the start of the year. They won't be as different because this doesn't move anything here, but at the end of the year it does move stuff around, if you can follow what I'm saying. But anyway, but it does move these ones around at the start of the year as well, because we've got an extra day in here. The 42, okay, the 42nd, and then we've got the 212, which again, that would normally be the 322nd day of the year, except it shifted this year. And the interesting thing about the 322nd day of the year, which is normally, if you go to the other side of the year, would be the 18th of November. That's our 1118. That is our like two main balance numbers, okay, in the chart of Lorraine, 1118. This year, this has now changed to the 13th, and the 13th would have normally been 321. Okay, and what was interesting about the other side of the year, let's just go to it. And I might be saying something wrong here, but you can probably figure it out for yourself, because I get all confused with this flip over, which way the numbers are going and everything. But the 17th here, yeah, this would normally be 321. What's interesting about the 17th this year, if you remember, I did the Pluto, that Pluto decode with the different orbits, and 420 days was our difference between the two different orbits of Pluto. So there's our 42 number again. Okay, tying back to the 42nd day of the year. But that 420 happened to be, the midpoint for that happened to be the 17th of November, between our two, cycle end dates for Pluto. So what's going on here is, interestingly, is our chart of Lorraine 1118 has now is now joined up, because it's normally the 322nd day of the year. So that 322 has now jumped back to this balance point here with Pluto, if you know what I mean. Kind of like our calendar, because of the leap year, is now lined up the 322 with the 17th, which is the midpoint in the Pluto thing, the Pluto orbits. So if you can follow what I'm saying there, that becomes very, very interesting. Yeah. And again, with the dartboard, with the 320, let's go back to the other side of the year, it makes more sense. Here's our 320, okay. But our 320 ties right into, these same, the same idea. Like, if we were to do, so if we have Madonna on the 16th of November croaking, then what's interesting is this 320 is showing up. This is the final countdown here on the 14th of February. Check this, the 14th of February. 321, and then it's 320. So that 14th goes to that 320 that's in the dartboard. You follow what I'm saying there? The final countdown, and then this 203, the 320, right here. So something with Madonna on the 16th of January, tying to this sort of, I don't know, overall completion. I don't know. That idea of sort of, and here it is again, the 302 and the 116. So and then there's Madonna's numbers in the middle here. It is. I mean, I don't know what to say other than it's bloody interesting. Notice again with the number 11, that's to do with balance, returning. Check out this set of numbers down here as well. This read it backwards, 212. It's kind of, it's really, I don't know what else to say other than, and here's our 322. Remember, 322 here again with the 212. Here's the 12, and here's the 2 at the start of the column. The row comes across. The second row comes across, and the 12 column. Here we go, 322. So this idea of balance with 122 in the dollar bill, with that rebirth, with the, I don't know what to say, with the rebirth, with the Labor Day thing going on. Anyway, so what else have I got going on for this 116, apart from it's right here, and it just happens to tie to my grandfather? What else is going on with it? And it happens to be, the proper cross that's in the dartboard happens to be right here, and Madonna's right in the middle of it. So it is interesting that the 302. I mean, let's write it right here. Yeah, there's 203, and in the dartboard, the center of that cross is the bullseye, and we're looking for an arrow to shoot in that bullseye. The arrow is the number 1. So this is, look, we're coming back to 213 from the 203. That's what we're aiming for, is this number 1 to stick in the bullseye and get back to the start. So this is like, the place to get back to. It's interesting that the 11th, we've only got a couple more days, and that's at 3 days inclusive, like the rebirth of Christ. Again, I mean, it's just, what do I say, And then you've also got Cupid. We've got Valentine's Day, the 14th, and that is Cupid. And is Groundhog Day the 14th? Or it's right around that point. I don't know, but restarting the cycle over and over and over again, like Groundhog Day. You know, kind of interesting as well. And what more do I say in here? Because you know, this is probably already half an hour long. Let me show you the last two things, and then we'll be done. So if you remember on iPet Go as well, so I mentioned the Madonna thing with the Super Bowl trophy. So we've got that tie-in, and Super Bowl is here, and we're, you know, if we're tying in with Madonna, and we're tying these two dates together, the 116 and this, you know, and this is the reverse, of course, of 9/11. It's the upside down 9/11. And I've done some other stuff on this 116 in the previous videos you can go and look at. What is interesting is, especially with the 116, it was to do with the orbits of the moon and the Earth and the sun, and how all that stuff ties together, basically the diameters and the orbital periods that I did. I mean, I don't know how long ago I did that video. Not that long ago, but it was one of those numbers that was in there. What did I want to say? I wanted to tie back to iPet Go again, when the Jesus character comes out of, you know, that cathedral that's falling down, with the twin towers falling down again. There's a Vesica Pisces there, and actually I think it looks like Notre Dame, and obviously that idea with dame and dam, okay, and coming through the Vesica Pisces doorway there, okay, on his little boat. You notice the fish jump into the boat, and that could be several different references tied in there, but obviously there's this reference to the 153 fish, okay, and that reference to 153, I talked about the 153 a whole bunch of times. You know, I've talked about it a few times now, and the 315 number jump that's in the chart of, it's actually in Lucas numbers. So it's obviously a very, very important. It's super important. Let's put it that way. And obviously, the 315th day of the year is 11/11, and we have an 11/11 at the Hoover Dam. Okay, there's two inlet towers at the Hoover Dam that are stuck inside the Hoover Dam there. Trapped behind the dam as well is those two number 11s. Okay, so we have that 11/11 and connects back to 315. And if we go from Madonna, I've got the number jumps in here. Let's see if I got the Madonna one up first. Yeah. If we go from Madonna's birthday, 153 days, it takes us to the 16th of January. What is interesting about this as well is this 16th of January, when Madonna announced her tour last year. Yeah, she announced on the 17th of January. At least this is what I've got here. This is Wikipedia. Now, what's interesting about that is that's 364 days. We're a day short of a full cycle here if she croaks on the 16th. That I'll show you that reference here in just a second, in the chart of Lorraine. But 364 is an interesting number in the table as well. And so we're a day short there, but should have gone back to this. Hang on a second. But you know, this 153 fish, you know, that's our number jump. Well, hang on, if this is the birth of Mary here, and going to the rebirth back to balance here, i.e. dying and then being reborn again, we've got 153. We've got this reference to the Vesica Pisces, to the 153 fish. Okay, we've got the Vesica Pisces is where those two things, you know, the sun and the moon have come together. The two circles have come together and just started to kiss, and then just start to form that Vesica Pisces. And that once that gateway's open, well, it's a tough road at that point, but because that's the balance point between those two things, that point, it almost forms the number one. You know, I mean, you know, I don't want to waffle on too long, but you know, it's like the two O's and then the number 1 in the middle. And that Vesica Pisces is the balance point between those two different things. It's extremely difficult to stay at that point without jumping into one side or the other, without following one's desires to the other side, to the dark side. Yeah. But that is the balance point. That's the gateway. And obviously, if you can open that gateway back up and actually allow both sides of reality to balance one another, then you're golden. Otherwise, you're screwed if you just hop it back to a different side of reality, if you like. Anyway, what's interesting about this 153 is if 9/11 was like the birth of Christ into the Matrix, right? Let's look now at, well, let's look at, come on, Dan, where are we going? Let's look at September the 11th through 153 is, again, February the 11th. I mean, maybe they're just referencing the Vesica Pisces with the Super Bowl on that date. You know, the number 1 Vesica Pisces in the country, the football, you know, maybe that is the reference to this, or maybe something happens on that day, other than just a football game. If I was to have to predict, I mean, this would be nuts as well. If I would have to predict the people in the, I guess that would be in the final, there is a potential that you could see Kansas City again, and it'd be like the Triple Crown. You know, it would be, I think it would be the 3rd time in 5 years if they won it, which would be like a Triple Crown, and it would be like the 3-5 reference again, which would be pretty important. And if it were like Green Bay, we would have been gone back to Super Bowl 1. I'm pretty sure it was Kansas City, Green Bay in Super Bowl 1. So it'd be the completion of a cycle, the start over again. And in fact, you can imagine the media going on about it for building up to the Super Bowl. Oh, it's like Super Bowl 1 again. You know. So, you know, crazier things have happened, I'm sure. But there you go. Got a Super Bowl prediction in there as well. Got the Hoover Dam collapse. Probably, I was thinking the 11th of February, but it potentially could be the 13th still. We could see something mental on the game, you know, on that Super Bowl, in that Super Bowl game, something crazy. I don't know. Mahomes just cracked his helmet the other day, and so, you know, that's pretty mental. In a game. What else do I want to say? And again, the 11th, the 16th of January would cross-reference back with that, with Madonna. Would cross-reference back with that. But maybe we see Madonna on the 11th. I don't know. But anyway, it's all pretty much guesswork. It never seems to pan out anyway. But this is got some strong. There's some strong connections there with this one. Anyway, I'll catch you on another video here pretty soon, and if something does happen, I'll follow up. But anyway, thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye.